Raybacks to my right, and oh my gosh, what a day it's been. I'm going to immediately hand it off to you guys as far as your initial reactions from what the day has been, what we've done. Brian, we can start with you.
Oh, this has been awesome. First of all, Las Vegas is a really, really nice looking city. Just being able to drive through it and just see all the sights downtown, and then driving through the desert, whether we're going to the hotel to see the Chiefs media availability, just seeing like the mountains and the deserts, just the whole scenery has been really awesome. And of course the whole buzz. It's Super Bowl week. There's so many people here, so many big names. There's a lot of excitement going on. You can just feel it because it's all building towards the Chiefs and the Niners this weekend, two of the best teams in the NFL. This is what Super Bowl week I anticipated it to be, and it's certainly lived up to the hype so far on day one.
Yeah, Brian, I think, you're out here in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl, right? It's not like it's in I'm not trying to hate on random states, so maybe I'll pick carefully. But it's not like it's in Oklahoma, or it's not like it's in, I don't know, Maine.
It's Las
right?
Vegas.
So this is Las Vegas. Super Bowl, some big locations recently, Miami, a few years back. Arizona, maybe not as exciting last year, but the weather certainly similar out there to what we were expecting here. However, it's been rainy, so somewhat like New York, somewhat like home here in Las Vegas. It's definitely been a great experience so far, and I know those are cliche words, but this morning, Chiefs media availability, if you guys want to start there, I mean, talking about getting a chance to talk to the Kansas City Chiefs this morning, that's a team that seems focused. That's a team that seems like they've been here before. They're very used to the rowdiness, the craziness of this week. Maybe only Rashee Rice, the newcomer, has as much experience as we do dealing with Super Bowl media. But then again, he's been on a Super Bowl contender all season. So, he deals with those questions and that level of coverage. It's just been really interesting here to see how players are handling the level of attention, how players are going about their week, right? Like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. They're staying so far away from the action that without getting into too many specifics about location. Like, it's far, right? So it's interesting. I think this is all building up as a matchup that's a little bigger than just the two teams that are in the game. You have the unspeakable storyline on the Chiefs side, and the 49ers have their own buzz, and I think that just the fact that each team has had so much discourse this season around it, the Purdy, this system quarterback MVP or both debate has kind of sparked an interest in him that I don't think existed before, and now here they are in the Super Bowl. Just really interesting that these two teams converge to meet here. I don't know. What do you guys make of just the buzz around this matchup so far? I think the fact that it's a rematch might be the least promoted part of it, which is so odd to me.
Well, let's back up just a second, because there's a couple of things that I think are interesting to talk about that you mentioned there. First of all, just so people know, we are live from right now until 2 p.m. because we have the 49ers availability. Soon thereafter, we had the Chiefs availability this morning, as we alluded to. Really an incredible experience to get to talk to Chiefs players. We all asked a question, one player or another. I got to speak to Isaiah Pacheco. Chris got to speak to a few players, and Brian got to sit down with a couple players as well. The NFL really does a great job of making these players accessible to media. I think that's the biggest thing that I took away. And Brian, before we get into the Super Bowl itself, you got to sit down with a couple players. What were those conversations like?
So mainly I was trying to figure out what exactly the difference was for some people playing in their first Super Bowl ever last year,
right,
and then looking towards this year. Like, obviously we know Mahomes has been there a handful of times before, but I got to sit down with Lucas Niang, offensive tackle on the team, and he kind of described that there was a lot less stress this time around going from last year to this year, where now I kind of have a whole routine going as to, like, okay, this is Wednesday, this is when media is, we're doing this, then we have practice, and then just playing on that big stage for the first time a year ago has to be so gratifying and relaxing as a player. And then you look at the Niners too. Obviously they've had some turnover, but a lot of the players that were key factors the last time they went in the 2019 season, they're still here. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, you name it. There's just so many. Nick Bosa, like, come on. There's so many big, important players that still have a lot of Super Bowl experience, and that's kind of something that Chris was talking on at first, where the experience factor, you can really see it, especially with a guy like Patrick Mahomes. He has done an excellent job of just being so composed. Now this is going to be his 4th Super Bowl appearance, so you can definitely sense that in the room with the Chiefs, and we got that during our conversations with certain guys earlier today.
We also got to ask about certain pizza spots. There's a little Connecticut connection there.
Yeah, Niang went to New Canaan High School, which is not too far from where I went to high school at Staples in Westport. So we got to talk about New Haven pizza for a little bit. He had not tried Frank Pepe's, which I thought was very interesting because that's one of the top spots in New Haven. But overall, he gave his spot, and you do have to respect it because there really is no bad New Haven pizza.
Right.
Like, let's get that out of the way. Dave Portnoy has called that the pizza capital of the world.
Wow.
So it's a legit operation over there. So I'm glad I was able to kind of work that into the conversation because that's the important thing. Like, pizza flavor, like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. And then Chris, you got to speak to a number of players. What was your biggest takeaway there, and maybe your favorite interview you got to do today?
Oh well, you know,
they're all great.
Yeah, it's all fun. This isn't show and tell. It's more I figure whatever. It was definitely lots of fun to talk to players. I think the biggest takeaway from the Chiefs players was what I was saying earlier about them being used to this, them having been here before. I had a bit of time to speak with Rashee Rice, who hasn't, but George Karlaftis, someone who came right onto this team, right into Super Bowl runs back to back. Talking to him about being under Spagnuolo, getting to talk to Spagnuolo himself was really interesting as well. Coach Spags, being around with him and just getting to ask about, talk New Jersey a little, but also getting to ask about his DNA as a coach, what goes into his mindset, and kind of how he views the players. It was really interesting talking to Spagnuolo about how he calls his defensive players his sons, and having heard right before from Karlaftis that he's like a father figure to him. You know, like it's a respect that goes both ways there. So that's, I think, my biggest takeaway was the extent to which the Chiefs defense plays for Coach Spags and goes hard for him. I think is really impressing me most from this morning.
I mean, you talk about the experience factor. Like, Spags has won a Super Bowl with the Giants before and now has been with the Chiefs for a while. So I think that's just like a huge thing that you can't ignore, is that like the Chiefs are ready for this game. They seem like a team that's built for this game. It really doesn't matter what happened in the lead up to this, whether they were playing road playoff games, whether they were playing in negative 30-degree weather or not. They were still able to be the Chiefs and end up getting here at the end of the day. And Julia, you got to talk to Isaiah Pacheco as well. I mean, how was that? A 7th rounder. He was able to give some good insight as to what a 7th round pick should be able or try to do in that sort of position to get to where he is at now, because he's been doing great things for the Chiefs.
Absolutely. I think his story is so interesting, going from 7th round to not only an impact player. Like, that storyline alone in itself is, very interesting and very compelling, but also to be an impact player on a Chiefs team that needed that offensive production desperately. You have Patrick Mahomes, you have Travis Kelce, but it proved that wasn't quite enough. And Isaiah Pacheco really has stepped into that role and done a lot for the Chiefs. So it's cool to be able to ask him, from his perspective, where he is now as an NFL player, what he would tell someone getting drafted in a later round that, obviously that's the dream, is to get into a team and be able to have an impact on it. And that's exactly what Pacheco has done. So him being able to give his thoughts on what he would say as far as advice goes to other players who will get drafted in later rounds is really interesting. He said, we all lace up the same shoes, focus on what's important, and I think that's the best advice you could get.
And we're going to see that possibly with someone that we're going to talk about a lot over the next couple of days or so, and that's Brock Purdy, who's also 7th round pick, not only 7th rounder, but the last pick in the draft last year, and then he comes in, leads the Niners to an NFC championship game in 2022. Might have gotten them to the Super Bowl if there wasn't that disastrous NFC title game where all their quarterbacks got hurt and they were running Christian McCaffrey out of the Wildcat now he had a full season under his belt, and he was still the same impact player. He got the Niners to the Super Bowl, and yeah, he's doing it all as a 7th-round pick. So you're seeing it on both sides where there's really high-impact players drafted in late rounds, too. So I think that's another interesting storyline for the Super Bowl this week, and there's just a lot to sink your teeth into, and there's just a lot going on. There's just so much to talk about through the week, and I'm sure we have plenty of time to do it.
I think that's the most fun part about this, is that there's so much to talk about, and boy, will we have the time, because we will be on until 2 p.m. Pacific time. That's a weird adjustment for me to say there. I think that's 5 Eastern, so we'll be on today from that time, tomorrow from 11 to 2 Pacific, 2 to 5 Eastern, and then again at the same time on Friday. So hope you enjoy listening to us talk about the Super Bowl, because we are going to be in it to win it on that front. But we will also be having interviews from time to time. It is a who's who around here. It's really incredible to be in this atmosphere at Radio Row. But let's zoom out a bit, because the people might not know. Chiefs versus the 49ers is who is in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs are 11-6. The 49ers are 12-5. But I think the storyline for each team is so different. The Chiefs really had a rocky road to get to this place here. So let's start there. Let's start with the Chiefs. First of all, I wanted to get overall takes. Did you expect the Chiefs to be in the Super Bowl?
It's hard for me to say no, I didn't, because they're the Chiefs. But at the same time, when you look at the road that they took in the playoffs to get here, you couldn't ignore the fact that Patrick Mahomes was playing in his first road playoff game ever, especially at Bills Mafia, too, where those fans are crazy and so boisterous at the opposing team that it really makes it difficult for teams to play in that environment. But one thing that
100%.
was noted earlier at the press conference we went to is that that kind of hostility that they had to face all kind of brought them together. I think Mahomes said that in his press conference talking to the media. So really, the Chiefs have just been found a way to weather every storm. So when you look at a team like the Ravens and the Bills, I was kind of leaning more towards them being here at the end of the day. But at the same time, you see the Chiefs getting here, and you can't be surprised with the resume that they've built up in the last couple of years. You almost feel like it had to be the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think something that's so interesting is, the Chiefs were so good for so long, right? So as soon as you see them slip up, NFL fans from everywhere, everyone besides Chiefs fans, are going to jump on that and say, the Chiefs are done, they're washed. But this is such an interesting story, because they dealt with that narrative and overcame that narrative. I think that's so fun. But Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did not expect the Chiefs to be in the Super Bowl this year. I really thought it was about the diversity of their offense, the amount of looks they could throw at teams. I didn't think it was just going to be. I didn't think it was going to be enough this year. I underestimated both the extent to which their defense would keep them in games, but also the extent to which they could utilize the weapons they had on the roster. I think it's really easy to look at guys in other uniforms on other teams and say they'd solve your problems, but a lot of the times it might not happen, right? You're looking for talent to edge out scheme to an extent where you're saying, hey, it doesn't really matter what we run, 3 front, 4 front, whatever it is, because our guys are just going to go. They're just going to work. Now, you have Chris Jones and Karlaftis, and you've got a strong line. But what the Chiefs have this year that I think is very different from these Chiefs teams, these Chiefs Super Bowl teams of years past, is probably the defensive back rooms there, and the strength there is different from years past, and in a positive way. I'm curious to see how that affects how the rest of the Chiefs how the rest of the Chiefs defense plays, because they can kind of lean on their defensive backs in a way they weren't able to before. And so, talking to Steve Spagnuolo earlier, I asked him, how much of their scheme does Chris Jones enable, in the sense where you wouldn't be able to draw up that kind of play or that kind of coverage if you didn't have Chris Jones drawing 2, 3, 4 guys. But that's the thing is that now you've got Jones up front, but you've got these defensive backs also on this Chiefs team that provide them scheme versatility. And we know in a playoff setting that's most important.
Well, I think what's funny is if you have a Hawkeye, if you will, on the screen, if you notice people behind us, Baker Mayfield just passed us. I just wanted to throw that in there that, it really is. You could find anyone at Radio Row, athletes of the past, athletes of the future, and in that case, athletes of the present. So if you're watching these YouTube streams, I would definitely
keep an eye out. Yeah.
You literally might see anyone walking past us. Baker Mayfield literally just walked by us. So I think that specific situation really encapsulates what Radio Row is.
Yeah, he was at the AP table when we arrived earlier,
right
and
next
we were
to
standing like feet next to him. So it really is a who's who at Radio Row, and we've already seen some really high-profile names. Just everyone kind of walking around. Everyone wants to be a part of this, right? We saw Stephen A. Smith is here. He's doing his show with Mad Dog over in the corner. Pat McAfee is over there doing his show. There's a Fox Sports set up over there. I saw the cast of SpongeBob too walking around with the Nickelodeon deal for the Super Bowl.
The voice of SpongeBob was literally here.
There's a lot of, and it's such a diverse crowd too, which is also, it's not just athletes, it's not just members of the media, but it's really just celebrities who want to be a part of this and really want to take in Super Bowl week, especially in Vegas too. I mean, I've been trying to figure out like what the difference is from like doing a Super Bowl in Phoenix compared to Las Vegas, and people are enjoying Vegas so far based on what I've been able to take in.
Yeah, I mean, it's Las Vegas. You had the media party last night, our nice welcome to the city and to the festivities, the coverage, everything. It's definitely just a different kind of experience here, but, you don't want to get too much into coach speak, but it's about keeping the main thing, right? It doesn't change no matter where you are. And,
Ruh-roh. And we're back. There we go. I think we lost connection there for just a second, but I think
just a moment, but we're back.
It's not a party until something goes wrong.
Right.
A little internet connection.
There's a lot of people using internet in here too.
Exactly.
So.
But I feel like that is a perfect segue to take our first break of the day. We will be back, and we're going to zoom it out further for the San Francisco 49ers on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
58. I'm Brian Raybacks, Julia Moss. We have Bridge Gotham
Welcome,
now
Bridge.
with us, the fourth
Thank you
member
very
of our
much.
crew. Bridge, welcome in.
Happy to be here, guys, and as you can probably tell, we're taking shifts. There's so much going on here at Radio Row, trying to get guests, trying to get a whole lay of the land, and, it's really cool. I mean, for those watching on YouTube, we have our own table set up. Each radio station here has their own table. This is sort of everybody coming together from all over the U.S., the best place to meet people, the best place to bring people on, the best place to talk football as we head into Super Bowl week here. And, of course, San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs. You guys talked about that all in the last segment, but I heard we're going to kind of get into more of the Niners side of things here. And I have to say, we're going to head out and actually do media with them later this afternoon, which we look forward to. And we had Kansas City this morning. I think for the Niners, I think there's so many storylines. I mean, you could start with Brock Purdy, the seventh-round pick, making it to the Super Bowl, right? Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, I don't know. Where do you guys want to begin here? I mean, there's so many different angles to attack this from.
Well, I think we can start it with how they're similar to the Chiefs, but at the same time, they're not. Like, when we talked about Kansas City, there was a lot of doubters for them and their path to get to the Super Bowl and how they had the worst season they've had with Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. Then they had to play a couple of road playoff games. None of that really existed for the 49ers. Everyone out of the NFC seemed to be picking them, and with good reason, too. You look at what they were able to do this year. At times, they looked unstoppable and unbeatable. And they dominated the NFC for the most part. They had one weird stretch where they lost 2 seasons, but just were not able to get that win in that pivotal game to get to the Super Bowl. But now they are here, and that was really, I think, the expectation. I don't think anyone was really strongly considering another team, maybe other than Dallas, out of the NFC, other than the 49ers.
I think something that's so funny about this matchup in particular is that you look at the Chiefs and you're surprised they're here. But the 49ers, you expected them pretty much from week, 8, 9? Like, they just were cleaning house on all fronts, and it's because of the weapons that they have. But now that it's so funny to think about, because the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, and they weren't you wouldn't expect them to be. And the Niners are here, and you would expect them. But now that they're both here, it's like, okay, Patrick Mahomes is in the Super Bowl, so it seems like he might be unstoppable. Like, any other team, any other offense, I think the 49ers would be heavily favored. But because it's Patrick Mahomes, because it's the Chiefs, even though they had a so-so regular season, the worst regular season under Patrick Mahomes, it doesn't matter because this Chiefs team really plays when it counts, and they play good football when it matters, and that's being proven this season. So the 49ers have just the most amount of weapons I think you could have on a team. They've drafted well. They've brought in a lot of really great pieces, like Christian McCaffrey took him from the Panthers. So I'm super intrigued about this matchup, of course. I think it's going to be very competitive, but the way we got to this point is super interesting. But for looking at the 49ers, it's going to be so tough because if you stop Christian McCaffrey, cool. You have Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel to worry about. If you stop them, okay. You have Brock Purdy, who, system manager or not, can find just about whoever needs to be found to win a game.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk later in the week of, is Brock Purdy a system quarterback? Is he a legit MVP candidate? That's kind of the debate that's tossed up with him all season long. But one thing we do know is that he was the last pick in the draft the year before, and it's still kind of a discrepancy between him and Mahomes when you look at them and just compare the resume. Mahomes has 2 Super Bowl rings. This is the 4th time he's playing in a Super Bowl. And you look at Brock Purdy, well, he really this is his first time here, and he's only won a couple of playoff games. Like Mahomes, he's never had to really he's never won a road playoff game. So with this, it's still unfamiliar territory for him, and you're wondering how exactly he's going to react. But you look at what he's done all season long. Everyone's had their skepticisms with him, and the Niners are still here. He's still won big games down the stretch, and he still was able to lead the Niners to the Super Bowl here in Las Vegas. So I feel like you have to be able to believe in Brock Purdy and think that he is the guy that's going to help the Niners, or at least put them in a good position to compete in this Super Bowl this weekend.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I mean, look, the San Francisco 49ers were in the Super Bowl for a reason. I think the narrative that he's a game manager, I think it's silly for a couple reasons. One, look, the results matter, and he's gotten this far, so you could call him any number of different names. At the end of the day, they're in the Super Bowl, and likely your favorite team isn't. So they have to be doing something right. And I think what you said was perfect, Brian. They're a very complementary team. They play complementary football, great defense, great offense. And with all those pieces, yeah, you'd be shocked if they lose. And for a majority of the season, I mean, they seemed unstoppable. You talk about, yeah, they slipped for a little bit, but since they got into the playoffs, they've looked really good. I'd say the only scare came in the NFC Championship game when they faced a major deficit against the Lions.
Yep.
But what that game, I think, showed all of us was the ability for that team to rally and to come back, that when you knock them down, they're not really down. So for the Chiefs, let's say they take a pretty big lead. Maybe they go up 2 scores at halftime, don't feel comfortable. Not that you would ever feel comfortable in a Super Bowl until it's all done. But it really does bring into all of those different factors.
Well, even against Green Bay, too, you saw them fall behind initially. But when you look at their resilience and their ability, this Niners team, they were the team that was always going to be here, felt like. And whenever they got in a position where they faced adversity, it never really seemed to affect them. Even when they were down 24-7 to Detroit in that first half, like you mentioned, it's still, they always just seem to have that confidence, and that home crowd played a big role. George Kittle was talking about momentum and how he was able to give them that. And I think that this team has a strong fan base, and you're feeling that early in the week. I don't know if you watched any of the early media stuff, but whenever the Kansas City Chiefs are talking, people are booing. Vegas is not that far from California, so we're seeing a lot more Niners fans in this particular territory for this Super Bowl.
Well, listen, we need to continue this 49ers conversation 100%, but we actually have to take another quick break because I'm looking to my right, and we have an interview. Alexander Bellinger will be on the air with us right after this quick break. Stay tuned. You are listening to One on One from Radio Row.
offensive lineman for Chicago Bears. And then I was also able to go finish up. And knowing and being around the right people, because in college everything is catered for you, right? You know when the schedule is, you know, okay, we have the nutritionist meeting today, academic advisor meeting the next day, weightlifting early in the morning, then I meet with my position coach. It's going to be no different in the NFL. It's just you're a little bit more responsible for yourself. So that's where my job as an agent comes in, to kind of rein all those different parts in and build the team around them.
Well, I guess on the topic of that, just how much of your kind of philosophy as an agent, how much of that do you take from your playing days and your personal experience? Like, do you take lessons that you learned as a player and apply them to your work as an agent, where as a player, I wish I knew this, and just try to apply that to your role now?
100%. That's the thing, right? We're all playing college football. There's a select few of us that get the opportunity to go play Division I at a big school, right? And you look at that opportunity, and we all want to make it to the next level, but we don't know how to get there. And so that's what I'm most prideful of, is being able to share that knowledge of how other guys are getting there to help get you there. You tell me your goal is to be in the NFL. Okay, well, these are the steps and these are the things you're going to need to be able to do to get to the NFL. Obviously, it's no guarantee, right? But it's one of those things where we have a really good, what I call, playbook around these guys to give them what exactly they need to push them in the right directions, to at least be on target. You know what I mean? It's no guarantee. However, just being able to be there and be working towards that.
Obviously, everyone has different journeys to the NFL, but when you talk about taking it to the next step and trying to find what exactly helps a player go to that next level, what specifically have you seen that allows players to get to that next level, other than the skill set that they have? What other qualities do you have to possess to take it to the next level?
In terms of qualities, I mean, obviously hard work is the biggest cliche one, right? Hard work, but what does that really look like? I think for a lot of guys, when they come into college football, there's guys that are older that are playing, right? And you just try to emulate those, and you find their good traits that the coaches really praise them for, and you try to repeat that within your own game and your own self and your own body of work. You know, one of our guys, KB, I think he's doing an interview right behind us, but KB played with Cooper Kupp. A lot of people don't know that. You know what I mean? So you think of Cooper Kupp being this Swiss Army knife, do-it-all guy, but then there's also Kendrick Bourne. So who was rubbing off on who, right? Because they both made it to the league in their own way, and they both had great success.
Yeah, I mean, those skill sets are really fascinating that you put them together like that, because I think even, you know, you want to talk about Kupp, he's someone who I think people underrate how physical he is. I think people underrate how much pressure he puts on defenses to stop him from all four directions, right? Because he'll cut on you, he'll juke you, but he can move you too.
He can take you vertical down.
So he'll take you down, but he can move you too. So what is it about just like knowing that about a player, knowing that you have these different comparisons and models? Do you try to model, especially younger? You were telling me you've got rookies, right?
Yep.
Do you give them other pros in the league?
Absolutely.
You say, hey, like this is game tape you got to be on?
Not just game tape, getting them around them. That's the big thing, right? I keep kind of hitting on this point of our playbook, right? Part of our playbook is getting our rookies around our vets early, right? I was fortunate to work at a sports training facility between coaching jobs that has done a tremendous job with a bunch of high school, college, and NFL guys, and iron sharpens iron. You hear that a lot in this sport, is iron sharpens iron, good versus good. But that's 100% what it is you take our rookies. We got 3 guys this year, George Halani, Tariq Owens, and Ryan Nixon. Tariq Owens is the son of Terrell Owens, and Ryan Nixon is the nephew of Willie McGinnis. Both Hall of Fame bloodlines, right? So they have the things. We're middle interview with our guy, founder Henry Organ. But that, just getting them around each other to see how KB works, to see how Samori Toure works, and then they start rubbing off on each other like, I'm trying to be better than him. And that, when you see it start to click, it's special.
Well, and you mentioned training facilities and just trying to keep players healthy. I mean, how difficult is that in today's game, especially in the NFL, when you're looking at sometimes you need your body to recover and then you're playing games with 4 days of rest and short weeks? Just how difficult is it now, and how do you just try to maintain that at the NFL level?
I mean, what these guys are doing now is incredible. I mean, I played with the original two-a-days in college, right? It's 2 physical, hard practices. Not to say that they are any less hard, but the recovery time, like you're talking about, I think what people are missing that I think Chip Kelly kind of mastered years ago was sleep. Right? These guys getting enough sleep, not playing video games, not staying up scrolling TikTok and doing dances all night.
It's hard.
It's hard. It sucks you in. So we really preach sleep and being around these different facilities and just trying to get guys to understand, like, you are a tool, you are a brand, and so you have to take your off-field as much as you take your on-field, and they have to match.
Yeah, Brian loves TikTok dances. Just can't.
He
can't stop.
This is why I'm not in the NFL. It's that reason only.
maybe the least likely person in our crew to ever do a TikTok dance is why.
If you guys make it to the big tourney, to the March Madness, you can do a TikTok dance.
I mean, if Fordham goes to March Madness, yes.
Okay.
I'll put that out there right now. Yes,
okay.
For sure.
Fantastic, Big Al. Anything you want to plug, promote? Anything you got to throw out there for us? For our listeners?
I mean, I want to plug you guys, right? You guys are doing a great job. Student broadcasters coming up in the world of sports. I think that's one thing that doesn't get talked about enough. And I think right now, because of social media, we have a little bit more access to it. But I wish at some point I would have learned the other things in sports other than being a professional athlete or a college athlete, what it takes to make all of this happen, right? And it wasn't until later on in my life that I really realized the amount of work that goes into this, right? As an athlete, I get on the bus, I drive to the stadium, I warm up, and I play the game. But tickets, marketing groups, fundraisers, all the different type of things you guys have to do. So I'm just going to plug you guys and the students that are aspiring to be in the world. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, today is Women in Sports Day. I saw on Twitter, so I want to plug all the women in sports. And my girlfriend, I'll have to shout her out. She works for a sports marketing firm and works with Visa in the NFL. And so she works diligently, way harder than I do in sports. And so I appreciate her and every other woman that works in sports.
That's how it is, man. Keep us grounded. Well, Big Al, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate you
guys.
Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Keep listening here to WFUV Sports on Super Bowl Radio Row. We'll take a quick break right now, but we'll be back after this. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Patrick Mahomes for the next 15 or so minutes, because I think it is a super interesting topic, because you think about the easy conversation to have is Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, who's better? I think for now, I think Tom Brady is the unanimous answer, but how far is that distance in your opinion before, like, what does Patrick Mahomes have to do in order to be in that echelon of Joe Montana, Tom Brady, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that's such a good question. And at least my answer, what I'd say is, well, it's hard to put Montana and Brady in the same echelon. I mean, I think Brady is so head and shoulders above everybody else. His body of work is second to none. You talk about 7 championships. You talk about the MVPs. You talk about everything. The guy was a winner for 20, 22, 23 seasons. Right. It's something you've never seen before. And, they're drawing comparisons now with the Chiefs to the New England Patriots, because that's what analysts do. And, for the first time since the New England Patriots, we're seeing a team win consistently, whether that means getting to the Super Bowl, whether that means getting to the AFC Championship game. They are kind of the new quote-unquote villains. But to kind of tie that back to I guess you could say the GOAT conversation, Mahomes has a long way to go. I think it's so silly to even say that he's close. I think there's 2 things. Number one, purely based on the fact that he has 2 championships right now, a third potentially on the way, that's still not close to 7. I think the other thing is it's so early on in his career. I think it's hard to compare. And when you do compare their first however many years, 6 or 7, they are similar. So you could say that he's on pace, but Brady was on pace to retire at 35, and then it was 40, and then it was 45. So it's hard to know how long you can really play. To me, I think Mahomes is an extremely talented quarterback, might be one of the most talented quarterbacks we've ever seen play the game. But what Tom Brady did, it's second to none, and I don't see Mahomes catching him.
Right. Well, that is a little bit of a take, saying you don't think he'll ever catch him. There's some interesting statistics. If you just compare their first 6 seasons, let's start there, because neither of these quarterbacks started their first season of professional football. So they're on a similar, I guess, trajectory of their first 6 seasons. Weren't expected to really be the guy that first season.
Yeah.
Certainly Brady less so than Mahomes. But let's look at their first 6 seasons. Super Bowl victories, Brady has Mahomes beat by 1. That could obviously change. That could tie.
Change. Exactly. That's right.
Super Bowl MVPs tied 2 apiece. AFC Championship games. This is where it really, you start to think. Brady 3, Mahomes 5. So
that's a dumb stat in my opinion.
Is it?
Who cares how far you get if you don't win the big one? That's what I like to say.
All right, well, let's go AFC Championships.
LeBron James went to the finals 80 times, but he only won 4 times. I think LeBron's great as an individual player, and we're going to stick to football. But I'm saying I think that the Chiefs are great, but I just think that at the end of the day, championships are what matters, and Brady got it done, and so has Mahomes so far. But I think comparing, he has X amount of AFC championships, because 5-3 is very close. Now, if it was a much wider gap, I would say that. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad argument. I'm just to me, I don't see that as it doesn't stick out as much to me.
So let's say Mahomes wins the Super Bowl.
Sure.
All right, let's say he wins it and wins the Super Bowl MVP.
All right.
How much does that close the gap? 1
more championship closer. He has to get to 7. So, I mean, I don't know why we're complicating it. I think it's very simple. I think that he has to reach, that's what I've said about LeBron. If you can't get 6, that's it. That's the end of the day. I'm a numbers guy, and of course, there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. If he ends up throwing for the most touchdowns ever, right? There's a lot of individual statistics. But if you're going to play for, let's say, 20 years, right? It was still year, 6 for Mahomes?
Yep.
Yeah, so he has a long way to go. And Brady did have a stretch from 04 to 14 where he didn't win a championship, went there twice, lost to the Giants both times. But no one was as successful as Brady. I mean, he won a Super Bowl in the first year that he started. Mahomes did not. And Mahomes didn't win a Super Bowl because he lost to, guess who? Tom Brady.
Yep.
And then Mahomes gets to the Super Bowl a couple years later, and he loses to Tom Brady, gets destroyed. So the 2 times he's faced a Tom Brady team, he's been crushed. Tom Brady has outplayed him and has outdueled him. And that stat will remain 20 years from now when Mahomes is retiring. That'll still be true. So I think that's very interesting. To me, I think it's championships. Mahomes has to pass him for it to be definitive, or at least tie him and then have him beat in many statistical categories.
Well, let's zoom out a little bit here. Let's not talk about the Brady-Mahomes comparison as much as just how good Patrick Mahomes has been throughout his career, regardless of any kind of comparison to Tom Brady, because something that's so interesting to me about Patrick Mahomes' career is that it feels like every time someone's put him in a box of things, he can't do, he then does it. Because the big narrative around Patrick Mahomes was he can't win a Super Bowl, or not a Super Bowl, a playoff game on the road. That was the big thing. The big monkey on his back, if you will. And honestly, that felt unfair even if in itself, because he just never had to play really a away playoff game. So that just obviously also really coincides with how good he's been. But then he does play a couple playoff games on the road, and guess what?
He proves he can do it.
He wins,
Yes.
exactly. And we are actually going to be cut off once again in this segment. There is so much more to talk about. But
To be continued.
To be continued, certainly. But we're going to take about a 30-second break here because we have another interview on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. We will be right back with more coverage from Las Vegas.
What's going on, guys? I'm Jack Warner, one of your New York Rangers beat reporters for the 2023-2024 NHL season. I'll have you covered all season long as New York looks to bring a Stanley Cup back to the Big Apple in Peter Laviolette's first season as head coach. Follow me on Twitter at Jack_Warner23 for live game updates, post-game media availability, and all things Blue Shirts.
Hey guys, it's Nick Palmer, your New York Islanders beat reporter for the 2023-2024 NHL season. Tune into my Twitter at NickPalmer55 for live game updates in addition to pre- and post-game analysis. To get updates on all things Isles, follow me as the Blue and Orange try to bring another Stanley Cup championship to Long Island.
Welcome back to Radio Row here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm Chris Persianen here with some of the most popular people in town, if you can't tell. We got Nick Ferguson here with us, and we have Coach Jeff Reinbold. Guys, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Hey, it's a blast. Anytime I can put my man on blast back to New York City, it is a good day because Nick was a I'm gonna
choose your words.
Now, I'm going to tell his story because you know what, and I'm taking nothing away from Kurt Warner, but Nick's story is actually, in my opinion, more impressive and more dramatic. And there are a lot of funny twists along the way as we tell it. But for New York Jet fans, they will remember Nick as starting safety on some of the really good Herman Edwards teams, and then we left and went to Plan B to Denver and finished his career there, and was teamed up with John Lynch in the secondary with the Broncos, and now is doing media in Denver, but is always going to be forevermore my son. He is my adopted child.
Yeah, I am for so many different reasons. As I was coming in to Radio Row, I saw a guy who went to Morris Brown College with me, and that was kind of the HBCU school I went to, and I pointed you out. And I was like, that was my former DB coach in the NFL Europe with Ryan Fire, and he was my head coach with Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I said, well, here's the thing that's interesting about Jeff, and this is why we connect on so many levels. I said, I remember when Jeff cut me, right? Jeff didn't really look in my face when he cut me, so I knew something was wrong. What he was telling me.
He broke up with you over text?
Yeah. Well,
there wasn't text then, but I would have done it if
he did it face to face, but he didn't look at me. And I said, here's the crazy part about it. Jeff cut me. I stayed in town, but I end up living in his house, taking care of his dog, and that's kind of the strange relationship that Jeff and I have.
Well, I got a question for you. You served as an assistant coach with one of the very relevant teams here, the San Francisco 49ers, in 2018, and that was after coaching internships with a bunch of different teams. Did you happen to learn anything about coaching from this guy? Anything that you you applied? Do you maybe we'll turn his volume off so he can't hear you, so you don't have to give him credit.
Okay, here's what I learned. I mean, coaching is a very intense field. And by me coaching myself, I learned a lot about what I put Jeff through, right? So that was kind of the lesson, because you want to pull your hair out talking to certain guys, and it's all about building that rapport and that relationship with those players. So that was something that I learned from Jeff that I try to use in my coaching career, but still it was agonizing to watch players. You go over something all week long, and you're thinking, okay, well, they should be able to go out on the field and do it, and when they don't do it, you want to pull your hair out really quickly. When I was coaching the 49ers, Monday night game in Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers, and there were a couple of things that transpired on the field, and when I was up in the box, and I'm looking at the other coaches, I'm like, didn't we go over that this week? Why are those guys busting? And after the game, obviously we lost because Aaron Rodgers moved the ball down the field, and they scored. I called my wife, and before I even said hi, I didn't even say hi. I just unleashed this gambit of just swear words, right? Because I needed to get it out. And I was like, oh, man, this is how every coach that coached me felt, right? So that's kind of what I learned.
All right, now, okay, so I got to tell this story because it really is so good. Nick grew up in Overtown in Miami, and, obviously there's all kinds of athletes in Miami. I mean, tremendous high school football. But Nick was I learned this from his cousin who I coached later on in NFL Europe. Nick was he was an undersized kid as a high school kid. And all the high school kids out there listening really ought to pay attention to this story. And so, he wanted to play on a football team, and one of the only ways he could, belong was they had a drill where they would run a receiver across the middle, and then the older DBs, when Nick was a young player, the older DBs would just come down and unload on him, and he'd keep getting up, and they'd hit him again, and he was like the Energizer Rabbit. You couldn't keep him down. But that started a pattern of determination in a kid that didn't have any place other to go than Morris Brown, which is an HBCU school, which is, HBCU has provided plenty of athletes in the National Football League, but Morris Brown, not so many. They don't even play football at Morris Brown anymore. So now he has to go find a place to play. He graduates from Morris Brown, goes into George O'Leary's office at Georgia Tech, and I'm going to tell this story fast. Sits down, says, I want a chance. They say, kind of moving along, kid, right? He comes back, no, I want a chance. And I found this out later. George called one of the assistants and told him, get that kid out of here, right? And in the conversation that it took to get Nick from the couch out the door, Nick wrangled away to if he got into school, he could walk on in the spring. Well, he parlays that into an opportunity, starts as a senior at Georgia Tech, goes to Cincinnati as a free agent, cut, comes to Saskatchewan in the CFL. I trade, I get him, I cut him. He comes back. I take him to NFL Europe. Bears allocate him. They cut him. Then Buffalo takes him the second year. They cut him. And finally, he makes a practice roster in Buffalo. And the Jets they lose a guy with a hamstring, and all of a sudden they need to fill a roster spot in the middle of the season. And Bill Parcells, I believe it was, said, you remember that kid Ferguson from Buffalo? He played like his hair was on fire. Let's bring that guy in. At least he can cover kicks. Nick parlayed that opportunity into a 9-year NFL career. And along the way, he knocked out more than his share of his own teammates with friendly fire, both in games and in practice, because Herman Edwards calls me and he said, hey, you better get your guy under control. And I'm like, I know Nick's a good guy. He's not going to be out on running the streets on Broadway or what. What do you mean, Herman? He goes, who was the receiver that you blasted in practice? The guy I think was a first or second round draft choice.
Santana Moss.
Yeah. So he blows up Santana Moss in practice. Herman says to me, get your boy under control. I said, Herm, I've coached the guy 4 times, and there's no getting him under control.
The crazy thing about that is that was the year Mike Westhoff was our special teams coach, and he drafted Santana in the first round to be a wide receiver and a returner. And it just so happened, as crazy as it is, it happened on the special teams play. And for me, I only know one speed, and that's full speed.
Go.
And yes, and this makes it worse because Santana didn't play his first year for the Jets because of that injury. So I remember when Herm actually looked at me, and it was like everyone kind of was shocked. They heard a sound, and all I heard was Nick. Right? It was like he knew it was me. But that kind of continued throughout my career because there were several players with the Denver Broncos who I guess seasons were ended because something happened in practice. You know?
Something happened.
Yeah, something happened in practice.
Let me just tell you this, that something also happened with the Houston Texans at the end of his career when he tackled his DB coach. So
see,
I ain't gonna get him in trouble.
See that's a
little
I'll give it to you really quickly. So my DB coach at that time was just a royal pain in my butt. And he was trying to find whatever way to have Coach Kubiak think that I couldn't play anymore. So it got to a point where they were not starting me. And I was like, well, I mean, they're probably going to end up cutting me at the end of the year anyway. And it was my 10th year. And there's a drill that they do when they put the ball on the floor and you have to jump on it and get in the fetal position. Fumble recovery. So the first time I went to grab the ball, he kicked it. And then I said, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to say anything about it. And then we did the drill again, and he kicked my ball again. So instead of me trying to retrieve the ball, I just ran at him a full pad zone and tackled him. And then I got up like nothing ever happened.
That's the way she goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's one non-hit I got to ask you about, and maybe even if you want to give us insight on this play. You pressure Tom Brady into throwing an interception to Champ that goes 100 yards, right? So that moment in such a big game, obviously we're here at Super Bowl weekend. Talk about all the hours of practice, whether it's tackling coaches or dummies, all the hours going into a moment like that. Does something like that feel perfect to you? Like a play that doesn't only, obviously QB pressure shows up on the stat sheet, but you didn't make the tackle. You just made the play. What's that like?
Well, I mean, it was great because I'm a part of NFL history. Like if you ask Champ, he doesn't really want to talk about it anymore because on that particular play, he didn't score, right? And I say, well, it was his fault because he didn't score. I did my part. All he had to do was just cross, the goal line, and we would have to score. But to be a part of something like that, it is extraordinary, especially knowing my story and where I came from. And, as a kid being on the outside looking in, going through the CFL, NFL, Europe, you dream of those types of moments. And you never think that you're going to be a part of something like that that's special. And for me, it's something I can tell my kids and show them, hey, listen, this is what Dad did. Because for me, I mean, I'm just dad to my kids. They don't even think I'm cool, right? But when I show them a play like that, they go, oh, you actually did something with your life. So it's just kind of funny how it works out, but it's great to be a part of a play like that.
One final question for you, Coach. Hawaii, you know it well now. I don't know if I'm obviously not breaking anything. I don't know if I can say specifics, but IDL, right, is the focus for you upcoming.
Yep.
I know you're excited, but we'll talk about that opportunity coming up.
Well, because, that's home to me. It's where I live. And, even when I was in professional football, my wife and I have a home on the Big Island, and an opportunity to go home and be closer to my family, certainly, and then to work at a place I love, because I was there when, in 2007 when we were undefeated and played Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, and, the year before we had beaten Arizona State in the bowl game, and, we had a great football team. And then it fell off, and it's been a tough grind to get it back. The head coach, Timmy Chang, who was a great player there, and called me in the offseason and said, would you consider coming back? And I jumped at the opportunity because of the fact it's home. And there's so much tradition and so much history there. You go to, the Noga brothers, Falanico and Al, and who were great NFL players, Jesse Sapolo, Matanavasa, who has 2 Super Bowl rings with the Denver Broncos and led the NFL in sacks. I mean, I could name 100 guys for you, but all of those guys are our elders. We consider those guys the elders, the ones who paved the way, and we've got to get the program back to what it was. And I think that we're on the right track. And the number one way to do that is you got to have players, and that's the bottom line in every level of football, whether it's the NFL or college football. It doesn't matter. You need players.
Guys, thank you so much. Nick Ferguson, Coach Jeff Reinbold, thank you so much for taking the time here on WFUV Sports. If you're listening at home, stay tuned. We'll be right back from here in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Go Rams. 7 blocks of granite. Let's have it.
Yes, sir.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris Persianen.
And I'm Will Grant.
And we're 2 of the hosts for WFUV's very own basketball podcast, Pick and Pod.
Tune in weekly for updates on our takes of the latest around the NBA and exclusive insight from our very own Knicks and Nets beat reporters.
We'll have you covered on everything from all of the NBA's latest drama we know and love
to debating all year long which team will get to lift that golden Larry O'Brien in June.
Don't miss a beat from the hardwood on WFUV's Pick and Pod.
at Radio Row, on Radio Row, whatever the terminology may be. It has been awesome. We've had so many great different guests, so many great interviews. But one constant is, of course, talking about the game, right? It is Super Bowl week, and Julie and I were earlier, we were talking a little legacy talk with Patrick Mahomes. If he wins a Super Bowl this year, that's 3 Super Bowls in 6 years, basically matching what Brady did in the early part of his career, getting 3 Super Bowls pretty early on. And Brian, we want to sort of loop you into this conversation.
Oh, please.
The question that Julia was asking and I was kind of asking was, you know, it's the classic question they like to ask on all the big sports shows. What does Patrick Mahomes have to do to close the gap with Tom Brady? I know it's such a big question, but I guess to keep it small, winning one this year, I guess what would that do to move the needle?
You know, I was thinking about this a lot when the Chiefs officially punched their ticket. And when you think about it, like if Mahomes wins his 3rd ring already, like he's on a similar trajectory to what Brady was doing. Because Brady, he didn't win his 4th one until his 12th year in the league. Yeah, or something like that.
Against the Seahawks, Super Bowl 49, Malcolm Butler with the interception on the goal line, too.
And when you look at Kansas City and what they have done in the last couple of years, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think, why should we expect the Chiefs to go and not get back there every single year and give Mahomes every other chance? Because he's ran the AFC. Like, he's not even just like making the playoffs every year. Every 6 years, in the 6 years, he's gone to the AFC Championship every year. He's gone to the Super Bowl now 4 times. He lost just 1 against Tampa in the COVID year. And listen, if he wins his 3rd, he's on a better path than some are giving it credit for. I know people want to dismiss, he's nowhere near Tom Brady. He's got a lot of years left, and I think he could be well on his way, especially if he makes his mark and wins his 3rd ring on Sunday.
Look, I think it's super telling that he can have what statistically is one of his worst seasons of his career and still make the Super Bowl. I mean, this guy is just a team leader. I think that's the biggest thing, is his individual stats aren't what's going to drive this team forward. He just knows how to win games in certain situations, especially in the playoffs. I mean, you look at his stats this year, I believe a career high in interceptions in a season, up there with the least amount of passing yards, I think the 2nd least amount of passing yards, second least amount of touchdowns thrown. I mean, this is by and far one of his least performative seasons, and they're still in the Super Bowl. He still has a chance to get that 3rd ring. Yes. And that's the mark of a really, truly great quarterback.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't mean to cut you off there because, like, I was agreeing with you. It really is amazing what he's been able to do, right? Not only is he young and basically came into the league, and I'm not going to say he hasn't lost, but where he has lost has been very far into the playoffs. I think, you know, he has a lot of time left, but there are a few things I think to remember. One, Brady played longer than, like, basically anybody, right? And I'm not saying Patrick Mahomes is going to fall off a cliff, but, you know, playing till 45 is pretty unprecedented. And winning a Super Bowl at age 43, I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Also winning Super Bowl MVP. So he has a lot of time, but I think my biggest fear for him is kind of what happened to Brady, which is he had early success in his career. And, well, Tom Brady, from an individual perspective, was consistent throughout his career. But he did, as I mentioned in our earlier segment, he had a 10-year gap from 2004 to 2014 where he didn't win it. Got to the Super Bowl twice, but lost to the Giants both times. To Eli Manning, of course. I mean, I have to always remind people of that. Yeah, can't go without mentioning that. So, but it's funny because even though he didn't win over the course of those 10 years, like, the Patriots were still consistently dominant. So my point is that there could be some sort of gap in Patrick Mahomes' resume as well, where I don't see him or the Chiefs slowing down or giving up the AFC West anytime soon, but perhaps some other teams might overtake them in the playoffs. I think the other thing that made Brady great was that, you know, he did break a lot of records, right? He threw for 50 touchdowns in 2007 when he had a guy like Randy Moss with him. Like, that's what I'm talking about. And the thing that Patrick Mahomes has is he has a lot of great weapons, but, you know, he lost Tyreek Hill a couple years ago. Travis Kelce on, you know, toward the end of his career, right? He only has another year or two if we're going to be realistic. So Brady had weapons early in his career, and he got new weapons. So it's kind of, you know, I made this joke. I said, Patrick Mahomes' favorite weapon that he's going to be known for in 10 years, he's in the 8th grade right now. Like, it's hilarious to think about, but when you think about a guy like Gronk and Brady didn't start hooking up on the field until about halfway through Brady's career, right? And you think of Brady and Gronk as inseparable. 10 years, Brady didn't have Gronk, won 3 Super Bowls, went to a 4th. So to me, it's just like the landscape is going to change so much over the next 10 years that the one consistency, the ingredients that made the Patriots great were head coach and quarterback, and as long as Andy Reid and Mahomes stick together, I do trust that they'll keep winning. It's just a matter of seeing how it'll all work out.
And there's even already been changes that Mahomes has had to deal with. He lost his top receiver in Tyreek Hill the year prior, and in the first year without him, they still win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But they didn't even exactly replenish. Like, they didn't replace him at
like
all.
That's the thing. Like right now, there's not necessarily, other than Kelsey, like a go-to option at wide receiver. So it's still all the more impressive that people were kind of questioning, is Mahomes going to suffer from losing a weapon like Tyreek Hill, as good as he is? No, he's still maintained it, and that's kind of what you're talking about with Brady. Like, his weapons were changing rapidly, obviously, with how long his career went, and we can see the same for Mahomes, but they have very similar traits where they're able to just keep the locker room together and just stay composed regardless of any adversity that they may face. And Mahomes is back here again, and you can't just not have the Brady comparisons. I don't know how you can't do it. I know it's early and there's still a lot of time for Mahomes left, but I think it's worth having the conversation.
Bridge and I certainly hashed that out earlier today, but I do want to bring that back we only have about 4 minutes left here, but I do genuinely feel like Mahomes is off to a stronger start in his career than Tom Brady is. I think Mahomes has nothing but time on his side. I mean, just that stat you mentioned about, 10 years before Tom found Gronk, Mahomes is already so well off as far as being able to find different receivers, different tight ends, that if there's any wide receiver that has maybe not an ounce of talent, but, is a good wide receiver, Patrick Mahomes is going to find that receiver. The fact he's able to do all of this with his best receiver being a tight end, and, Travis Kelce is, by and large, probably the best tight end of all time. That's a different comparison we won't get into.
Yeah, but he's one or two.
Exactly.
Right? So,
And also, you mentioned that, Brady played longer than anybody, but I think that we could see a change in that in the next couple of years where,
more the norm.
Aaron Rodgers is going to play next year when he's 41. Like, Drew Brees played until he's 41. I know Brady played till he was 45.
But those guys were not looking. I mean, Rodgers, I know he only played 4 plays last year, but there's a reason he left Green Bay. And Drew Brees in that last season, throws 3 interceptions in that game where he goes out against the Bucs. I'm just saying, like, Brady being able to play at an elite level at age 45, and how about leaving the team you played for 20 years in a COVID year, going to a new team, new system, proving the doubters that you're not a system quarterback? He could have retired 10 years ago and been a Hall of Fame quarterback, but he did that. He went to Tampa, a team that basically hadn't been to the playoffs since 2007, and they win a Super Bowl in their first season, also being the first team to win a Super Bowl in their home stadium. So, I don't know, just things like that, to me, are what kind of elevate Brady to even another level. And I'm not saying Mahomes has to go leave the Chiefs, but, just the only doubters that Brady had were like system quarterback. He's like, all right, you think this, you think that? I'll prove you wrong. So
maybe Mahomes needs to go over to the NFC East. Maybe
the
Giants. Maybe.
I wonder why you would want that.
I don't know why.
No bias.
That's just the first name that came to my head for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Well, that'll just about do it for our show today. And we'll plenty of coverage throughout the week. Chris Persianen, of course, is here with us. And for Julia Moss and Brian Raybacks, I'm Bridge Gotham saying so long. From Radio Row Day 1, the sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. And One on One is a production of WFUV Sports.